and welcome to Graywood Gardening. I am cutting down this common mullein that's growing all around the banks of the veggie garden. I actually should have done this at least a month ago because a bunch of this has already gone to seed. And that seed is going to start growing next year, but cutting it down now, at least I stopped the rest of it from going to seed. This is actually a biennial, so I don't need to worry about pulling it out of the ground or cutting off at ground level. The plant is going to die at the end of the year this year. My goal is just to have as few seeds as possible in the ground, and I think I'm going to have a lot of them there. Alright, well, on this video, we are actually going to spend some time in the veggie garden, and we'll be planting out the fall veggie garden crops. But before we do that, we actually have some harvesting to do. It is the end of August. We didn't get the veggie garden planted until the end of June or even into July, so we are finally having some crops to harvest in there. But first, I gotta finish these guys off. Look at this zucchini! I mean, it's a little big. It was only half the size yesterday. They grow so fast, but I'm gonna tell you a dirty little secret. Zucchini has been my gardening bane for years. I have literally never been able to grow a zucchini that I could pick and eat. But that ends today. Come here, my precious. Perfect. Here's the thing. The first time I tried to grow zucchini, everything went great, tossed some seeds in the ground, got a big old zucchini plant, started pumping out zucchinis. But every time the zucchinis got about that big, our squirrels would come and eat them. We had crazy squirrels there. We put out jack-o'-lanterns, they would be completely eaten within 1 to 2 days. So the next year, I found a different spot in the yard, dug out a little bed, and put a giant cage of hardware cloth around it. Unfortunately, the place that I had dug out was much more shaded. It was in the shadows, it was in a dip that was really wet, and we got powdery mildew that decimated the plant. Went through like every powdery mildew treatment known to man, but nothing worked. We lost that zucchini. Then we moved, and we had a place that just had a big concrete patio and no yard. So we got one of those big self-watering containers to plant zucchini in, and some other stuff. The self-watering containers like that had like a little tube that sticks up and you just put water in the tube and it's got a reservoir on the bottom. They did not work well at all. The zucchini plant just died. Everything that was planted in those containers did really poorly. And they smelled like sewage, like there was like something rotting in the base of the water. All the plants died. I finally dumped them. Oh, and in one of them, not the zucchini one, but the other one, was a giant bee's nest. Bees went flying everywhere. I feel like it was related to the curse of the zucchini, though. Ooh, that is a picture-perfect cayenne pepper there. And so, for the one vegetable that everyone in the world says is the easiest vegetable to grow, that every beginning gardener should grow, I think that's at least 4 years we tried to grow it and failed to get zucchini. So this year, I was very insistent that we were gonna get zucchini. 10-foot bed, planted only 4 plants, 2 zucchini, 2 yellow squash, so they were nice and spaced out. We have huge amounts of sun, really great airflow, and then of course we got everything out a month late, and I was so disappointed when our plants were like anemic and stunted looking even a month after they were planted. I was like, no, it's the curse of the zucchini. But we got fertilizing, and next thing you know, we have phenomenal looking zucchini, even if they are much later than they should be, which is expected given how late we planted them. So I'm harvesting all of the ripe cayenne pepper here. And I plan to use this cayenne pepper. I'm actually going to dry it and then grind it up in a spice grinder to make red pepper flakes for the year. We've actually been using some of the jalapenos as they come up, but we're very, very far behind, which you can see over here. We have jalapenos that have turned red. When the jalapenos turn red, they're actually hotter. They have more of the capsaicin in them, which is not something that Mrs. Graywood is going to approve of. So I'm going to go ahead and harvest all of the jalapenos that have turned red and let the plants continue producing the green ones that we prefer. I've been harvesting bell peppers as we need them for meals. We don't actually need any today, but as you can see, we have lots and lots of peppers on these plants ready to go whenever we need them. The basil is pretty overdue for harvesting at this point, and you can see it's trying to bolt and getting these little starts of flower stalks popping up all over the place. Harvesting basil is awesome because every time you harvest it and you snip out one of these stems, the place that you nipped it off is going to split and grow 2 more stalks that'll all get leaves. So literally every time you harvest, take maybe 2 weeks in summer to recover. Every time you harvest, there's literally twice as many leaves as there were the time before. So normally what I do when I'm harvesting is I'll pick off anywhere from the top 4 to top 6 leaves, and I just snip it off with my fingers at the stem, pulling off something like that. And what I'm going to do today is get this whole half of a bed harvested. I'm going to make a whole bunch of pesto. And the great thing about pesto is we put it in little, like, I don't know what they are, not 8-ounce, but little Pyrex containers that we shove in the freezer. And the pesto keeps in the freezer pretty indefinitely. So if I can grow enough basil in a year, I can have enough pesto to last the entire year. So when I'm deciding how much to nip off, and it's not really important how much you actually nip off. If you're just nipping off like 4 leaves or 6 leaves or 8 leaves, you're not going to hurt the plant. It's going to split from wherever you pinch it off. But when you're deciding what to pinch off and how far to pinch off, anything you see that's bolting, make sure you pinch off at least 1 set of leaves below where the little flower stalk is coming up. If you just pinch it off right under the flower stalk, it's just going to send up another flower stalk. Whereas if you take a few leaves off, it'll grow a little bit before trying to bolt again. Now, as you can see, it doesn't actually look like I've harvested a ton of basil off of here, and that's because these plants are already so big and have split so many times. So now I'm just giving it one final once-over and making sure anything that shows any signs of bolting at all, I'm nipping that little cluster of leaves off. But yeah, at this time of year, and when the basil is this mature, it's going to be about 2 weeks before I need to come out and do this again. And when I do this again, I'm going to get right around twice as much basil out of it. All right, now it's time to get inside before the rain gets here and make some basil. Or make some pesto. We're making pesto out of basil. Ooh. I have here a tray of 38 broccoli seedlings and 38 cauliflower that I started from seed a few weeks ago and have just finished hardening off. I also built a couple of new 10-foot raised beds to hold them. We got a really late start on getting the veggie garden put in this year because we had to wait for the deer fence to go up because the deer eat everything here. And so now I'm just a little bit behind on getting my fall crops planted out. So in addition to the broccoli and cauliflower, I have a whole bunch of lettuce and some Swiss chard that I'm starting inside from seed, and toward the end of August, that should be ready to plant out into the garden. I have some carrots that I have seeded underneath some cardboard to keep the soil moist to help with their germination. I planted a few rows of bush beans. Bush beans are not cold hardy at all. The first freeze will kill them, but I'm gambling that the days to maturity is short enough at about 50 days that I'll get a crop of beans before the first frost hits. We'll see. We have an early frost, that's not going to work out so well. I also have a little makeshift trellis here that I planted some snow peas under, and in front of that I have a bunch of spinach that I direct seeded, and the spinach is just beginning to come up now. When spinach first comes up, it actually looks like grass. Its cotyledon leaves look like little grass blades. So with all of that, we should have a pretty nice crop this fall coming in around the end of September. The broccoli and cauliflower, the peas, the spinach, the lettuce, the carrots, all of those are frost tolerant, and a little bit of frosty nights won't harm them at all. On the other hand, things like the bush beans and the corn are not going to handle the frost at all, and I'm kind of gambling that we don't have an early frost this year so we can still get a crop. But either way, there should be a lot of production coming into September and maybe even at the beginning of October, depending on how our weather works out. All right, let's keep planting. Back in June, we ordered a whole bunch of bearded iris online from Schreiner's Iris Gardens. And these now just showed up. It's the middle of August. It's the perfect time to be planting iris out in the garden. These are actually going in the cottage garden. We do have a patch of bearded iris there that are rescue iris, and I actually dug those up and transplanted them out to the edge of the meadow where I have a bunch more of those rescue iris planted. The plan is that these are going to get planted on the outside of the path that runs through the middle of the cottage garden. Now, we don't have the papers to actually mark out that path yet, so the placement is going to be a little bit tricky. I also suspect we probably bought a little bit more than we have room for, so anything left over is also going to go out into the ever-growing iris patch. But I think this is going to look fantastic. I think having this sinuous line going through the garden is going to look great, both because it's going to cover a bloom period that I think is a little weak, but also I think iris foliage looks great any time of the year. Let's get started. When planting bearded iris, the most important thing is that the top of the rhizome is above ground level, while the bottom of the rhizome is in the ground. So it's very, very narrow parameters there. There's generally two ways of accomplishing this. The first is the mound method, where you dig a big hole and you make a nice compacted mound in the center. and you set the rhizome on the mound with the roots sprayed around it so that the top of the rhizome is above ground level when you backfill. The other method that I kind of prefer, just because it's easier, is the cliffside method, where you dig a big hole and you set the rhizome against the side of the hole, so that it's also nice because you can line it up and make sure the top of the rhizome is above ground level, and then backfill it that way. Now, if you care about which way it faces, bearded iris have a fan that is curved. The concave part of the curve, the inside of the curve, is always the direction that the rhizome is going to be, and that's also where the flower stalk comes from. So some people care about position in it so the flower stalk is in the right place. Personally, I don't think it matters. The flower stalk's going to come up above the level of the leaves anyway. Plus, as this grows, you can even see right here, this is a new fan starting to grow that's going to be facing this way. And then from here, a new fan might grow that faces this way. So eventually, they're going to be all facing different directions anyhow. All right, let's get these planted. Bearded iris, of almost all plants, is the plant where it is worth being very, very finicky about the exact depth that you plant it, where really planting it even just an inch deeper can sometimes cause problems. One down, 15 to go. I'm now hardening off the final tray of plants that's going to go in the veggie garden this year. This is mostly lettuce with some Swiss chard and kohlrabi. I'm going to get this in the ground in a few days, and then we should be able to eat fresh greens out of the garden from the middle of September until at least the middle of October, possibly the end of October, depending on how the weather treats us. Well, that's all I have for you on this video. Next time, we have to start a big new project because we just finished building our new front porch. Still have some staining and painting to do, but this front porch means that we also have a new front porch garden that we need to dig out. Right now it is filled with stone and roots from the bushes that I removed and plastic and landscape edging, so it's going to be a big job to get all this dug out, filled back in with actual soil so that we can get some stuff planted this fall. Alright, well until next time, I hope you're enjoying the break in the weather, and happy gardening.